Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. This month we have Reilly Knowles, a local London artist, in for a chat about his artistic work and where he draws the inspiration from in his life. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. As we head into the holiday season, though, I wanted to take a second and mention local artisans and creators selling their work, either via their personal Etsy shop or if they're lucky enough to get a spot at the local craft bazaars directly from the artists themselves. These are local people that create all year long and likely have exactly what you want for that special someone on your holiday list. Let's normalize giving art as gifts. Disclaimer though, I am not one of those people. Consider this free advertising for the ones that do create the art. Get down to the Agriplex November 28th to December 1st, 200 vendors selling everything from soap to furniture. November 16th at the Hellenic Community Center, 75 vendors available. Same day, November 16th, the Coven Market is hosting the Maw Market on the mezzanine. I'm confident that you can find something for that hard-to-buy person on that list while supporting local artists. Supporting their side hustle, if you will. Artists need to eat, you know. With that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, though, on with the show. Welcome to the show. Welcome back. It is the next episode. It's episode 3 at this point, if you're keeping track. We are here again. Reilly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
You graduated UWO in 2020.
Yeah.
With honors of a Bachelor of Arts, right? Studio specialization. What does that mean? I get the Bachelor of Arts, kind of get the honors because you did really well. What is a studio specialization?
Yeah, at least at Western, at their visual arts department, their Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, you can either kind of specialize in art history, or you can focus more on like making art in the studio practice component. So for me, the specialization, that was what that was about. I had a little dedicated studio in my final year, along with the rest of my peers, and that was a place where I could spend all my time that wasn't in classes working on these projects. It was meant as kind of an intensive at the end of the program.
Did you have like your own space there, or was it something you had to kind of bring stuff back and forth?
It was great because I had my own space that was mine for the school year. I had my little corner in the back of this room, kind of boxed in behind filing cabinets and bookshelves, but it was really great. You know, I would stay there sometimes until like 3 a.m. just working away on stuff.
One of the struggles I have is that because I work in where I live, I have to kind of compartmentalize it and put it away.
Yes.
You know? And then when I drag it all out, so every time it's almost a new setup every time, right? So it does get a little frustrating. So that would be nice to have a little hideaway.
It was nice. Like now I'm making art out of the spare bedroom in my home, and it's a similar problem of like, I could be working on my art, and also there's a hamper full of laundry that I have to do. It's right there.
Never-ending laundry. That's the life things that you have to do in order to get there, right? You went to school for art and artistry. That's a commitment. You have to think to yourself, I'm going to go in, because it's a 4-year program, minimum, right? Plus all the extras you can do afterwards or during or that sort of thing. What drove you to that? Like, why did you woke up one morning and said, I'm going to do this?
Making art is just something feels like it's integral to my life and who I am. It's something that I'm always thinking about. Like I'm always just itching to make things. So it felt like a good choice for me. I know that not everyone has that opportunity, right? Like I think I was really blessed to have a family which is encouraging of my art and was supportive in me pursuing a fine arts degree.
Yeah, isn't that the thing, right? A little support back home goes a long way.
It does.
That doesn't mean you make or break you, but it certainly absolutely makes things a lot easier for you. So how long have you been creating?
I've always really enjoyed making art, you know. One of those kids that was always doodling and drawing. My parents put me into private art classes when I was a kid, and I studied with a few local artists in my hometown of Milton. Those were Tatiana Pastor, just like an amazing woman, and Fredo Yatzik, who's also a really great teacher. So I was really lucky to have those opportunities to kind of try to advance those skills early.
Right. Have you ever thought to yourself, finally, I'm an artist? Is that, do you think you can call yourself that?
Oh my gosh,
and be good?
That's such a funny question because I actually met up with someone yesterday who was trying to interview me a little bit too, and was really digging into this question of like, why do you think you're an artist? Like, what makes you an artist? And since then, I've been like having a little bit of an identity crisis.
It's
of,
a
like,
tough question.
Yeah, I like to think that I am. I think, making things and making art and exploring visually and exploring imagery, it feels integral to myself, and I suppose that's what makes me an artist.
Yeah.
But it's something that I will be thinking about for quite a while since that.
I feel like there are 80, 90-year-old people who are putting paint to canvas and who may still not consider themselves a hack at best. That's my personal, like, as a person who does things in the arts. I don't know if I would go so far as to say I'm an artist, but I'm trying. Really trying.
I think everyone struggles with that self-doubt because it is something so vulnerable to be like, I made this thing and I believe in myself and I believe in the things that I make. Like, it's difficult to have that kind of confidence in that.
Yeah, I would agree, right? And it's all about being backed up again, that support. Somebody comes along behind you and says, hey, you're doing pretty good. All right, let's talk about the art itself.
Sure.
Because your art does incorporate a bunch of things. You have a very wide scope of what you do. Again, I saw when I was doing some research back there, you had there's some photography, there's some straight up canvas. Tell me about your process and why you choose the things that you choose.
In a lot of ways, I'm still very much in this like searching and exploratory phase. And I don't know if, people who make art ever evolve out of that, but I feel like I'm trying all these things because I'm so curious about these materials and what they can do and how they can make me feel when I'm making art and what kind of material lends itself to what expression. So, I guess I'm enjoying the play of that and the exploration of that.
Do you feel like maybe getting to one thing maybe compartmentalizes yourself or pigeonholes you, or?
Perhaps. This is something I ask myself all the time because sometimes I feel like I'm so excited to try different things all the time that perhaps I just need to dig into something to acquire, a bit of a mastery of it to begin to have those skills to express what I'm wanting to express. I don't know if I want to pigeon myself and say like, oh, I'm a painter and all I do is paint necessarily.
Right. But I think for me, again, in the talking to the people that I talk to, there's that idea of 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours of doing something before you're even considered something. Apprenticeships. My daughter's going through right now, she's doing a mechanic apprenticeship, so she has to do blah, 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 blah before she can do anything. Kyle, I had on the show, he is a seamstress, but wouldn't call himself a tailor because a tailor requires hours and possibly a mentorship and that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if maybe, we'll come back in 10,000 hours. Where do you draw your inspiration from then?
Yeah, I think I draw it from a lot of different places, but maybe a few more than others. I like to spend a lot of time outside, sort of by myself, taking hikes, trying to enjoy the plants around me, kind of observing the plants and the animals and the quality of light and how that affects color. Yeah. I'm also quite inspired by recently regional folklore and kind of tales of the supernatural. I find them to be interesting ways for me to learn more about the place where I live. I'll often have this process of learning about a story, maybe in southwestern Ontario, and then wanting to go to the place where the story, supposedly took place. And it's kind of, a process for getting to these places I might not otherwise have visited.
Right. It sounds almost like you practice mindfulness as you're doing what you do. I mean, the moments of just communing, and just being who you are for that moment and just taking in what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that being, in the outdoors and making art, when both of those things are working, they put me in a really similar headspace of kind of going beyond my quotidian fears and anxieties, and I'm just observing and making connection and noticing things that are beautiful around me.
We move so fast as people these days that, again, just stop and smell the roses, right? Why do you feel that those local stories, and they call to you, obviously, why are they important? And like maybe, okay, so more specifically, because you can always answer generally why are they important, but why are they important to you?
I think that I'm not a person who believes in the supernatural, but I grew up with people who have enjoyed telling me these kind of tales of mystery or whatever. So I have this like curiosity about how people come to believe in the fantastical, and how sort of historical beliefs in the supernatural and these folk tales can tell me a little bit about, like, psychologically and emotionally how those people lived. Like, what were their hopes and their anxieties, their fears, and sometimes even these stories are really revealing of social prejudices, which are interesting to me.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. I mean, you think about even just some of the more kind of real old kind of things where you didn't, you don't eat pork, little things like that are born out of the fact that there were illnesses that you could get, so they had to come up with a reason to, story and sense of community. Keeping everyone informed, is that do you think that was a direct link, or do you think that's a happenstance?
Like the relationship between superstition and like community building.
Did the story, whatever story, did the story come out of we need to figure something out in order to help, or did do you know what I'm saying? Like
I see what you're saying. I think certainly there are like parables that have a specific message of like, don't go into the woods alone, children.
Yes.
I think the stories that I've been looking at are more often don't have like a prescriptive message, but I think that they contain things which might be insightful about the people who were generating this story.
Okay.
Like, especially when I'm really attracted to stories about witches, and often the message implicitly in those stories is like, we just shouldn't trust old cranky women that we don't like, which is really sad.
Which is sad, really, because they were tended to be the healers and the ones who knew how to do things, and ostracized because they maybe spoke out against. That's a whole another episode. We won't. Let's stamp that down for now, because yes, you're absolutely correct. The idea of, I guess what I was trying to get was there an attempt to explain something we cannot explain, and as opposed to a set of rules.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's this concern often in forces that we can't control, like creating these maybe ritualistic practices, like these folk magical practices around like a fear in not having security in the home, not having enough to eat, like these forces that are beyond our control, and certainly beyond the control at least of sort of everyday people 200 years ago who didn't have a lot of like resources for maybe to learn about the science behind why illnesses occurred, or again, that sense of community and trying to understand the world around you without having the internet in your pocket. We have talked before, and you have regaled me with stories, a couple of stories of local things. Tell me that story again, because I went on a deep dive after you told me that. And I went, look. So this story, I tell it because I feel like it's kind of has been formative in the way that I think about like histories of the supernatural and in my practice, or I guess in my life. But I grew up in Milton, Ontario. That's about, for the audience, about an hour and a half from London, heading east. And one day when I was quite a small child, probably in about the third grade, my mom came to me and she told me this story, that not too far from where my parents were living in Milton, there was this old farm property, and Milton lies within the shadow of the Niagara Escarpment, so a lot of these older buildings are made of that beautiful white rock that comes down off the escarpment. Yeah, not dissimilar to the way like a lot of old homes in London are made out of
yellow
brick. From the local clay. but she told me that as this house was being demolished to make way for a power station, that under the stairs, as they tore them back, in the darkness concealed there, they found a little girl's dress, which was pinned to the ground by bricks.
Bricks?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I found this really, it clung to my memory for such a long time. It really dug its teeth into me. This little bit of a story that my mom told me. I think like a lot of artists, I was a very imaginative and kind of sensitive kid, and these kinds of things would have a great impression on me. And I wondered for a really long time why this object had been concealed under the stairs. And I wondered, it probably had belonged to a person. What had become of this person? What was the story of this person? And that story kind of rattled around for a long time, as I said, and I eventually kind of generated some images, some art around it that kind of bore sort of my personal interpretation of the story. I was imagining this dress as being kind of a haunted object. Of
course, yes.
Yeah, this like empty piece of clothing, I think, in its weird, detachment from a human person, it has this like implied ghostly presence around it.
Yeah.
But eventually, in about 2020, when I had a lot of time on my hands to look into it, I had a little bit of a research toolkit from my university education, I decided to try to pursue the answer to some of these questions I had about this instance. So I received some photographs of the house from Heritage Milton for the first time. They were extremely accommodating. They also sent me a list of the former owners of the property. So I learned that people who had lived in this house were the Simpson family. They were Scottish settlers. I even found some of the final resting places of these family members.
Wow.
And in a nearby village cemetery. I found, a few young girls who plausibly could have owned this garment, but of course I wasn't able to attach a specific identity to it, but that was as close as I was going to get. But most importantly, I think I was able to look in a digital newspaper archive, and I found that newspaper article, which my mother had read to me all those years ago, back in 2006, I guess it was, and it recounted this instance, and it actually had an image of this dress, which I had been making pictures of, just out of my imagination, but I got to see what this actual artifact looked like, and saw in this picture it was being held up by Mr. Tom Morrison, who is a historical home expert. And next I pursued getting into contact with him, and he had a very lengthy phone conversation with me in which he relayed how this job had went for him, other homes that he had worked in this region where we both had lived, and also his own kind of experiences with the supernatural, which was kind of fun. But this was a very formative experience for me, because I learned that behind these little tales of mystery, which I'm interested in, these kind of creeping feelings that might cling to us for a long time, there often is a history that we can access, and histories of real people and the way that they kind of symbolically interface with the world. And again, it ties back to that idea of trying to deal with the anxieties and the difficulties and of being a human person through these symbolic actions. So I also looked into folk magical practices from Scottish settlers, and concluded that this dress was probably an instance of what historians of folk magic call ritually concealed clothing. So garments which are purposefully placed in sort of liminal parts of the home to try to probably ward against baneful forces. So to me, this was really an interesting object, because it's interfacing symbolically with the world, and it's an object which people are using to try to express some kind of desire or some kind of outcome. And I think that attitude is kind of adjacent to attitudes that we have when we make art, like using symbolism, using performance, using ritual sometimes. But something that
whether we know it or not.
So that was a really interesting instance for me.
2 follow-up questions. While in my deep dive, it was something about the magic or the power of the innocence of the person who would have worn that. You know what I mean? So that was the ward or the who's the whatever the magic you want to call it, was that like, at least that's what I read. So again, whether that's what it is or not, but also very interesting to me. You were 10.
I guess, how old would I?
You said grade 3, is that?
Yeah, I was grade 3, so yeah.
Yeah, right. Again, my math is terrible.
Yeah,
Mom said I was cute, not good at math. Your mom brought that to you. What does that say about your mom?
Yeah, my mom's a little bit of a like a history buff. She's really interested in local history. I think at one time she had wanted to be an archaeologist. So I think to her, this uncovering of an object which carries some kind of like historical force behind it was really interesting, and I'm sure she wanted to share that. But she's always coming to me with ghost stories and stuff.
I love that.
She's that kind of person.
See, that peels off a layer of Mr. Reilly. See, that explains a little bit in there, right?
It does, yeah, it really does.
Look, it's fascinating. And I love when I get a little bit of information, because I will dog it. What are you working on now?
I have this fabulous opportunity before me where I've just finished this project that I did for Ontario Culture Days. And so I get to decide where I'm going to go next. And I haven't sort of set a new project for myself, but I don't think that I'm going to. I think I've had enough of concrete projects for a while. I think I'm just going to sketch and just go out into the world and try to be inspired and notice things that are beautiful around me and just see where things go.
Well, the inspiration comes from different places, right? And I think we all need on occasion to take that moment, hit the brakes a little bit, slow down, and rethink of what we're doing.
Exactly.
I've done that several times in my life over the past 20 years, and whether you get back to it or not, that's I find the test of whether or not you're going to be, back at it and good at it, right? I have lots of different hats that I wear, none of them particularly well made. They're there, but a stiff breeze would make them blow them apart. So you just did a couple of stints. You're working at the Museum London. How's your public speaking going?
Oh, I did give an artist talk at Museum London last week, I guess it was, and that was for this Ontario Culture Days project I mentioned. The Visual Arts Department at Western, they do a speaker series called Art Now, so that kind of just perfectly coincided with this artist talk that Ontario Culture Days already wanted to do, so I kind of got slotted in there.
How do you feel in front of a crowd?
I had so much anxiety leading up to it, and like forcing myself to practice my presentation was like a little arduous. It was like, but once I was doing it, it just felt so natural and great, and the audience was wonderful. Like, it was mostly those Art Now students, and they were just so receptive and respectful and wonderful.
That always tends to help, right? Back home up in North, we do theater, and we would do a run from Wednesday to Saturday. Wednesday is the opening night, so that's always kind of a weird thing. Friday is the Friday night crowd, and then Saturday's closing night. Thursday night always felt like the entertain me crowd. Entertain me. So it ended up being, Thursday night was when all your friends showed up. Thursday night performance ended up being the best performance, because the people that cared about you and liked you and wanted to hear what you had to whatever made Thursday nights much better. So I have to imagine that in the end, yes, when you're surrounded by like-minded people, it gets a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
When does that end at the museum?
So it is actually only up for, I think, 9 more days. Its last day is October 27th.
27th, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so right before I'm cleaned out for Halloween. Thank you for coming back, Reilly. I appreciate this. Look, I said it before, and we're going to have you back for the podcast, because I feel like there's a lot of things that you and I could talk about.
I would love to.
We could share together, because I've got some local legends up north that we could talk about.
Oh, cool,
Lots of weird stuff up there. This has been Reilly Knowles. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, there you are. I have a separate, quick little interview with Reilly at the museum where he talks about the piece on display. It will be available on the YouTube channel, which I'll post below. Please pause as necessary. Unfortunately, there were some difficulties with the audio, so it wasn't quite good enough for broadcast, but I will post it with the subtitles so that you can at least hear and read what he has to say about his work. Next month, though, we will have Kyle Sherwin on. He is a drag performer and a seamster who makes all of his own costumes. We have an interview and some footage of one of his latest performances as Edie Violet. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you for tuning in, and I have been your host, Mick Patton.